The Force is old and full of shadows.
The planet does not pause for history. Mustafar's lava rivers have been moving since before there were eyes to watch them. Slow, indifferent, geological, and they are moving still. A gas vent splits the black rock 40 meters to the east and releases a column of sulfur into the sky, with a sound like a world exhaling its last breath. Somewhere below the narrow bank where two men stand, a shelf of cooling basalt loses its grip on the cliff face and drops into the magma river below, with a crack that travels up through the rock and into the soles of their boots. The heat is not heat in any way a temperate world would recognize. It is presence. It presses against skin and finds the moisture there and takes it. The sky above Mustafar is the color of an open wound. The black sand at the base of the lava bank is the color of burned things. All burned things. Every burned thing, compacted into a single surface that holds the imprint of boots and knees, and the dragged weight of the living and the fallen both. Two sets of footprints cross it in a dozen directions. The story of the last 20 minutes is written in those prints for anyone willing to read it. A story of pursuit and desperation. Of the terrible geometry of two men who loved each other trying to end each other. Two lightsabers burn above that sand. Both are blue. The color they share makes what is happening between them worse, not better. The color of Jedi. Of an order and a tradition they are both supposed to belong to, held against each other above the ash. One belongs to Obi-Wan Kenobi, raised above his head on the high bank of the lava river with the stillness of a man who has already made his decision and is only waiting for his body to carry it out. The other belongs to the man crouching 3 meters below him on the lower bank. The man who, 12 years ago, was his student. The man who, 9 months ago, knelt before a Sith Lord in a darkened chamber and accepted a new name in exchange for everything else he had ever been. The man whose heels are rising from the black sand. "It's over, Anakin," Obi-Wan says from the bank above, and his voice is controlled in the way that things are controlled when the alternative is coming apart entirely. "I have the high ground." The blue blade tilts back for the arc of the leap. Inside the body of Anakin Skywalker, in the fraction of a second between intention and motion, something ends. Not the fight, not the rage. Something older than both. Something that has been collapsing for 22 years. One small redirection at a time. One fear dressed up as love at a time. One choice that looked like protection and was actually surrender. The entire architecture of it simply stops bearing weight. And something else arrives. It does not arrive gently. It does not knock. The soul of a 45-year-old man, 23 years in service to a monster, a decade of grief so complete it had become the only name he answered to, and underneath all of it, buried beneath scar tissue and darkness and the specific numbness that comes from wearing a mask for so long you forget there was a face, detonates into a 22-year-old body with the force of something very much like dying in reverse. Inside Anakin's skull it sounds like a scream and a silence arriving simultaneously. No one else hears it. The volcano continues its ancient indifferent work. The rage is gone, not fading, not retreating. Gone, as though it was never there, as though someone reached behind his eyes and removed the thing that had been burning there for years and left nothing but the scorched hollow where it used to live. He does not mourn it. He cannot. He cannot feel anything yet except its shape, its negative space. The terrible silence where that constant roar used to be. Then the grief comes. It does not arrive in pieces. It arrives whole, the entire weight of 23 years without compression or mercy, dropping onto a chest that has no calluses yet for this particular force. Padmé, the last time her face held something that was not fear looking back at him. The younglings, their voices, their confusion, the specific sound of a child in the half-second before understanding arrives, which he will hear in every quiet room for the rest of however long he is now permitted to live. Luke, the name hits somewhere beneath his sternum like a closed fist. Luke, who he held for 30 seconds at the end of everything, and who grew up asking questions no one answered honestly. Who stood in an emperor's throne room and threw his lightsaber away rather than become his father, because his father had shown him, at the very end, that there was still something in the galaxy worth refusing to destroy. Leia, his daughter, who he put in a chair and hurt without knowing, who built a rebellion in her spine like load-bearing architecture, while the empire her father constructed made that rebellion the only reasonable response to breathing. All of it. All at once. Arriving in the half-second before his legs are supposed to fire. They do not fire. His muscles, coiled for a leap they will not complete, have no language for what has just happened to them. The energy has nowhere to go. It becomes collapse. His knees give, not backward, not forward, but sideways, off-center, the way a structure falls when the thing holding it up simply ceases to exist. He hits the black sand hard. One hand goes out. The other follows. His lightsaber leaves his grip the way a held breath leaves a man who has stopped needing to hold it, simply, without drama. It hits the ground a beat after he does, its blue blade carving a short arc across the black sand, rolling toward the lava bank, stopping 2 feet from the edge against a ridge of cooling rock. It hisses there. Its light catches the surface of the river below and trembles. He does not reach for it. His hands are pressed flat into the ash, his forehead drops toward them, and the sound that comes out of his chest is not a word and is not a name and has no container in any language spoken in this galaxy. It is the sound that lives on the other side of 23 years of enforced silence. It is the specific sound of a thing that was held too long by hands that had no choice, finally, mercifully, catastrophically, let go. Obi-Wan Kenobi does not move. His blade is still raised. His weight has shifted forward at the moment of the expected leap, a Jedi Master's body pre-calculating an arc, pre-positioning to meet it. And now the weight has nowhere to transfer and he does not move it back. He stands as he was. He watches. The man below him did not leap. The man below him dropped the blue lightsaber and fell to his knees, and is making a sound that Obi-Wan Kenobi has not heard from Anakin Skywalker in 12 years of everything they survived together. His first thought is trap. His second thought is trap. His third thought arrives slower, carrying less certainty. That sound is not something a person performs. His blade does not lower. His eyes move to the lightsaber at the bank's edge immediately. Its position, the distance, whether a force pull could recover it in the fraction of a second, it would take Obi-Wan to close the distance. He calculates. He is a Jedi Master who has been performing a kind of surgery on himself since Coruscant, cutting away grief and love and the 17 years of a shared life to get to the part of himself that can do what may need to be done here. And he will not allow hope to put the scalpel down. He has watched the dark side use hope as a weapon with exquisite patience. He knows its texture. He knows the specific warmth it manufactures in the chest to make a careful man incautious. Then the man in the ash lifts his head, and Obi-Wan's careful mind does something it has not done since the moment he watched the security recording in the Jedi Temple. It stops. The eyes looking up from the black sand of Mustafar are blue, not fighting to return blue. Not the strained, exhausted clarity of a man hauling himself back from the edge of something. Not the counterfeit openness of someone who has studied grief and learned to replicate its appearance. Blue the way they were when Anakin was 19 and showed up to every training session 20 minutes early and pretended he hadn't. Blue the way they were across 100 battlefields and 1,000 early mornings in a Coruscant apartment that smelled like engine oil and the specific tea Obi-Wan only drank when he thought no one was watching. Blue the way they were on the day Obi-Wan understood, quietly and without needing to name it, that this impossible boy was going to be the best thing and the hardest thing in his life in equal measure. The gold is gone, as if it was never there. One word leaves Obi-Wan's mouth. Just one. It is not welcome, and not accusation, and not quite question, though it reaches for all three and falls short of each. It is simply the word that contains everything. The 12 years and the last 10 hours, and the decision he boarded that ship already carrying, and the thing that decision is now crashing against. Anakin, the man in the ash, draws a breath that sounds like it costs him something. Then, he speaks. The voice is wrong. Not wrong in the way it has been wrong for a year. The clipped and airless cadence of a man who replaced his interior life with performance of absolute control. Wrong in the other direction entirely. rough, wrecked, carrying the weight of a life this body has not yet had time to live. The voice of someone who has crossed an ocean no map accounts for and arrived on the far shore, not knowing if the word shore still means anything. "I'm sorry," he says. A breath. "I'm so sorry." The lava river moves beneath the cooling blue blade at the bank's edge. A distant detonation, another gas pocket, another fracture. The world continuing its slow and violent becoming somewhere far below them. "I almost lost you again." The word again drops into the sulfur-stained air between them and does not dissipate. Obi-Wan does not know what it means. He does not lower his blade. He does not take his eyes off the man in the ash. But something in him, the part that has been performing surgery on itself since Coruscant, cutting and cutting to get to the part that can function, puts down the scalpel. Not deliberately. It simply becomes too heavy to hold. The volcano roars around them both. The lightsaber at the river's edge dims, its blade fading by degrees, its argument running out of power. Anakin Skywalker kneels in the black sand of the world he was born to be destroyed on, and he sobs, openly, without armor, without performance, in a way that the man he became never could. Neither man moves. The lava river carries its old fire past them both, indifferent and eternal, toward the sea. Obi-Wan descends the lava bank with the specific caution of a man who trusts nothing he has not yet earned the right to trust. He does not sheathe his blade, he does not hurry. Each step down the black rock face is deliberate, not slow, but considered. The way a surgeon moves in an operating theater, where the difference between precision and haste is measured in lives. His eyes do not leave the figure in the sand. Halfway down he passes the ridge of cooling rock where the lightsaber has stopped rolling, 2 feet from the lava bank's edge. He pauses there. One hand. A single deliberate motion. He picks it up and clips it to his belt without comment, without ceremony, without once looking away from the man below him. The blade has gone dark. It is now simply weight on his hip. The crunch of black sand under his boots, as he reaches the lower bank, is the loudest sound either of them has made in almost a minute. He stops 6 feet away. Close enough to speak. Far enough to cut. The volcano exhales somewhere to the south, a long pressurized hiss, then a distant detonation, another pocket of gas finding the surface, another small piece of the planet deciding it has waited long enough. The orange sky above them is beginning to darken at its edges, though whether that is the hour, or the ash, or simply the sky's own indifference to what is happening on this particular bank of this particular river, it is impossible to say. Obi-Wan says nothing for a long moment. He is looking at Anakin Skywalker's eyes. He is looking at them very carefully. The way a man looks at something he has been warned could be an illusion, and cannot stop himself from looking at anyway. Then he speaks. He does not say what happened. He does not say, "I believe you." He says the only thing a Jedi Master who has survived 12 years of war by trusting his instincts and verifying everything can say to a man who appears, against all conceivable logic, to have come back from somewhere unreachable. Tell me something Anakin Skywalker would know. The man in the ash is quiet for a moment, not the silence of someone searching for a lie, the silence of someone deciding where to begin, in a space too large to map from any single point. Then he speaks. He does not start with the Empire. He does not start with the future, or the dark side, or Palpatine, or any of the enormous catastrophic architecture of what he carries. He starts with Obi-Wan. He starts small. He starts with the things that only have weight between 2 specific people who shared a specific life. He says, "Your first training saber. The one you had when you were still Qui-Gon's Padawan. Blue, cracked hilt, the grip plate on the left side, where it took a deflection wrong on Melita Dawn. You kept it after you built your second. It had a resonance hum on the 3rd power setting that you always said you were going to fix and never did." Obi-Wan does not respond. His face does not change, but something behind it does. Anakin continues. His voice is still wrecked, still carrying the roughness of whatever crossed through him on the bank above, but it has found a kind of steadiness underneath. The steadiness of someone reciting from memory rather than invention. The first time I panicked before a mission, really panicked, not showed off recklessness, actually froze, I was 17. We were on Korriban. Pre-mission briefing. You pulled me aside. You said, he stops. Something that might be the beginning of a different kind of grief crosses his face. You said I was the most gifted student you had ever seen, and the single most exhausting obligation the Force had ever placed upon your patience, and that if I didn't get my breathing under control in the next 30 seconds, you were going to send me back to the ship to spend the operation reading maintenance manuals. The briefest pause. It worked. Obi-Wan's saber hand has not moved, but it is no longer pointing forward. Darth Tanis, Anakin says quietly. I wasn't supposed to know what happened on Harpori. You never told me. But I heard you and Siri, 3 years later, when you both thought I was asleep on the transport. The way you sounded when you said her name. He looks up from the ash directly into Obi-Wan's face. I never told you I heard. I didn't know how. The silence between them is the longest one yet. A man cannot manufacture the grief in that name. It does not come from research or tactical preparation. It comes from 12 years of paying attention to the specific sounds another person makes when they are carrying something they cannot put down. Obi-Wan is still standing. His weight has shifted, almost imperceptibly, from the balls of his feet to his heels. Anakin's voice changes, not louder, heavier, the way a door changes when it opens into a larger room. There is a desert planet called Tatooine, he says. You'll know it. You've been there. In 20 years there will be a boy on it, a moisture farmer's son, sandy-haired. Reckless. Impossible. Who will grow up asking about his father and getting answers that are true but incomplete. He looks down at his own hands, pressed flat against the black sand. This boy will become a pilot. He will become a soldier. He will become, without quite intending to, the spark that lights a fire that burns for years. He will find you, on that planet, living alone in the desert, and you will tell him enough to start him moving. He pauses. The lava river moves past them both, indifferent and continuous. He will end up in an emperor's throne room, on a space station so large it has its own gravity well, and the emperor will put lightning through him to try to make me watch my son die. And this boy, this reckless, impossible boy, Anakin's voice does not break. It does something quieter than breaking. He will throw his lightsaber away. He will tell the Emperor he is wrong. And he will be right. Because his father will remember, in that moment, what it is to be a father. He does not say his name is Luke. He does not need to. Obi-Wan Kenobi's saber arm drops to his side. It is not a decision. It is a structural failure, not of will, but of the thing that was substituting for will. The part of him that had been performing competence, performing certainty, performing the specific surgical emotional detachment that the last 10 hours required, that part is no longer available. Something has broken through it. Not the facts, not the verified details about the training saber or Korriban or Darth Tanis. The word father. The quality of Anakin Skywalker's voice when he says the word father, and the thing underneath it, which is the sound of a man who failed at it for 23 years and knows the precise texture of every year. Padmé, Obi-Wan says. Not asking, testing, filling in the shape of a story from the outside to see if the outline is consistent. He told you the twins didn't survive. Anakin is very still. He told me I killed her. The words come out one at a time, with space between them, when they brought me back in the suit. He told me that what I did on the landing pad, that she died because of what I did. That my anger, he stops. He starts again from a different direction. I believed him. For 23 years I believed him, because I had choked her, because I had done that. So I believed I had finished it. He looks up. In the end I came to believe he was the one who took her, that the dark side had been feeding on her through our bond, drawing her down toward nothing, all that time. I can't prove it. The droid found nothing wrong with her and she was dying anyway, and he was the one who told me I had killed her, to make sure I would never look elsewhere for the cause. Something moves through his face that Obi-Wan cannot fully name. He made me a weapon and told me I had already used it. Obi-Wan speaks very quietly. you died in his arms. On a second Death Star. It is not a question. And you were already gone. Anakin's voice does not waver. It has nowhere left to waver to. You died first. On the first Death Star. I was the one who. He stops. Takes a breath that costs him something visible. I was the one who killed you. I was the one who killed you. He meets Obi-Wan's eyes across 6 feet of black sand and volcanic wind. I'm not anymore. The saber goes off. The sound of it, the loss of that hum, that electric constancy that has been present since before either of them descended to this bank, is enormous in its absence. In the sudden quiet it leaves, the volcano sounds farther away. The river sounds less urgent. The wind carries its sulfur load past them both without comment. Obi-Wan's legs do not carry him forward in any heroic sense. They simply stop performing the function of keeping him upright at the correct height. He goes to his knees in the black sand. He reaches out, not for an embrace, not with any ceremony, and grips Anakin's arm above the elbow with both hands. The grip of a man confirming that something is physically present, that it occupies space, that it is here and solid and will not vanish if he exhales. I came here too. He stops. The sentence has no clean end. I had made peace with. That one's worse. He abandons both of them. Lets the silence hold what language cannot. Then, simply, you're back. Anakin looks at the man who trained him, who grieved him, who came to this burning world ready to do the impossible thing, kneeling now in the ash with both hands around his arm and his eyes, doing something they were not built to do, and says the truest thing he knows. I never left. He just made me forget. For a moment, 10 seconds, perhaps 15, neither of them moves. The planet burns around them as it has always burned, as it will burn long after both of them are dust and memory and the faint echo of something that happened once in the Force, and it does not care, and that is all right. They have enough. Then Anakin lifts his eyes to the sky. Something changes in his face. Not fear. Something colder and more precise than fear. The expression of a man who recognizes a specific sound he has been dreading, even in the absence of the sound itself. A soldier's recognition. A veteran's clock. Padmé's dying. His voice is flat now, tactical, the grief folded away with the efficiency of long practice. And Palpatine is 20 minutes out. We need to move. He is already getting to his feet, pulling Obi-Wan up with him by the arm that Obi-Wan has not released. I know how to save her. And I know how to end this. All of it. Today, he meets Obi-Wan's eyes one last time before they both start moving. But I need you to trust me one more time. Obi-Wan's answer is not a word. It is the sound of his boots hitting black sand at a run. The skiff is 60 meters from the lava bank, on the near side of the facility's eastern wall, and Anakin covers the distance without counting it. His legs know the direction before he does. Not from his 22 years of living, but from the other ones, the borrowed, terrible, necessary ones he now carries like a wound that healed wrong, pointing him toward her without consultation, without hesitation, without any of the things that normal navigation requires. He rounds the equipment housing at the facility's outer edge. He sees the skiff's running lights, dim and passive against the volcanic dark. He sees the 2 droids hovering at the edge of their operational radius, their photoreceptors trained on the ground below them, with the specific anxious stillness of machines watching for a vital sign they have been told to monitor and have been watching decline. He sees the shape of a woman lying very still on the black rock of the landing approach. He drops beside her before his momentum has fully stopped. Padmé Amidala is the most capable person Anakin Skywalker has ever known across 2 combined lifetimes, and she is the color of ash. Her chest moves, barely and with effort, as though each breath is the conclusion of a negotiation her body is conducting with the continued project of being alive, and losing, incrementally. 1 breath at a time. Her hands lie open at her sides. The nearest one is cold when his closes around it. Even here. Even like this. He recognizes the specific architecture of her face, the way he recognizes the weight of his own name, without effort, without distance, as something that precedes thought entirely. The medical droid speaks before he can. Its voice is flat, clinical, designed for information delivery rather than comfort, and it delivers its information with the unhurried precision of a machine that does not understand why urgency should change the order of words. Vital signs declining. Organic function within expected parameters. No injuries, no hemorrhage, no pathology it can name, or map or treat. The word it uses, repeated twice, is inexplicable. Life force depletion of a type its diagnostic array has no category for. It recommends immediate evacuation to a Level 4 medical facility. It names 3 systems within viable transit distance and ranks them by response capability. Anakin ignores it. His hands are already at Padmé's temples. He closes his eyes. The Force is not a battlefield here. It has not been a battlefield, he understands now. For a very long time, he simply stopped being able to tell the difference. Somewhere in the years of using it as a weapon, somewhere in the slow conversion of every tool he possessed into something that could be used to hurt. The Force. When he reaches into it now, with no target and no agenda and nothing to destroy, is simply what it has always been underneath all of that. The medium. The connective tissue of everything alive. The thing that makes the word living mean something beyond biology. He reaches through it, looking for her. She is there. Of course she is there. He would know her Force presence in the dark of any darkness, in any configuration of the living and the dead, in any universe that permitted him the mercy of existing. But she is far. She is far in the way that a candle is far when you are looking for it in a very large room, and it is almost out, not absent, not gone, but guttering. Its light. Too small to navigate by. Too small to find the center of, without moving carefully toward the edge of what warmth remains. He does not push his energy into her. He has 23 years of understanding what it means to take without asking, to impose without invitation, to reach into something fragile with too much force and feel it break. He does not do that. Instead, he opens. He opens the way a hand opens when it is offering rather than grasping, not extended, not demanding, simply available. He finds the channel between his Force connection and hers, the one that has always existed between them regardless of what he did to it, and he breathes. He exhales. Something moves through the channel. Something that does not have a name in any Jedi text he was ever assigned, because the Jedi texts he was assigned were written by people who had forbidden themselves from having anything worth giving in this particular way. It is not power in the sense of Force pushes and lightsaber throws and the mechanical application of will to matter. It is something simpler and therefore more total. It is the specific life force of the Chosen One, given freely, without condition, toward the only person he has ever loved, without also fearing the love. Her breathing changes. The shift is small. The droid registers it on its readout. The numbers are still wrong, but they are less wrong, moving in the correct direction by a margin too small to celebrate and too real to dismiss. He inhales. He exhales again. Deeper this time. He can feel it leaving him, not painfully, not catastrophically, but with the measurable weight of something being genuinely spent. A third breath. A fourth. He keeps going until the candle is no longer guttering, until it is burning steadily in the small, protected, inexhaustible way that things burn when they have decided to stay. Padmé, his voice is barely sound. It is the register of something said into a space between sleeping and not sleeping, into the gap where a person might still be able to receive a thing even when they cannot yet respond. I know what I did. I know why I understand why it feels like there's nothing left to come back for. He stops. The lava river makes its continuous sound somewhere behind him. But I need you to fight. He does not finish that sentence. He starts a different one. The kids need you to fight. His thumb moves across the back of her hand. Once, just stay. Please, stay. He sits back on his heels. His head drops. The Force presence that has been blazing through him since the moment of the overwrite. That clean, overwhelming light, the Chosen One's connection to the living Force running at full capacity for the first time in over 2 decades, is now a fraction of itself. Not gone, but banked down to something that requires attention to detect. like a fire that has been fed too much and burned through to coals. His hands, when he looks at them, are trembling. Not violently. The fine, sustained tremor of something that has been worked past its available strength. Obi-Wan arrives. He has been moving at a controlled run since the facility wall, and he stops 5 meters out and takes in the scene without speaking. Anakin on his heels, diminished, shaking, the droid readout trending in the right direction. Padmé still and pale but breathing with more intention than she was. He reads all of it in a single pass, and stores it. The weakness matters. He will need to know the shape of it later. Then Padmé opens her eyes. They find Anakin's face with the instinct of something that does not require conscious direction. She is in the way of someone surfacing from very deep water. The first moments not fully intelligible. The visual field arriving before the interpretive capacity does. She sees ash-streaked skin. She sees brown eyes that are bloodshot and wet, and looking at her with an expression she cannot immediately name, because she has not seen it in so long she had begun to believe she had invented it. An expression that is not performance, not management, not the controlled warmth of a man monitoring his own display of feeling. An expression that is simply, you. She searches his face. She is looking for something she had stopped expecting to find there. The thing that went wrong so gradually, she had almost convinced herself it was her perception that had failed, and not the actual substance of what she was seeing. The coldness, the distance, the quality she had learned to recognize as absence wearing presence like a coat. She searches for it now the way you search for a piece of furniture that has been moved, expecting to find it. Registering the space where it was. It is not there. He is there. All of him, nothing withheld. In his face the way he used to be in his face when he was too young to have learned to guard it. Present the way only people are present, when they have stopped being afraid of being seen. Her mouth forms a name. Not Anakin. Not the name she had learned to use when the other name began to feel dangerous. When the diminutive felt too soft for what he was becoming, and Anakin became the careful option. The name she called him at 19. The name she called him the first time and the last time anything between them was uncomplicated. Ani? He makes a sound that is not fully a word. Then he assembles one. I'm here. His voice is wrecked from everything the last hour has cost it. I'm back. I have so much too. It breaks. He does not try to repair it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For all of it. She is too weak for the conversation this deserves. She knows this. The full reckoning. What happened, how it happened, the weight of everything she was and was not told, the accounting that will require both of them to sit in a room for a very long time with nothing between them but honesty. That conversation is not available to her right now, and it would be wrong to begin it here on a cooling lava bank with a Sith Lord 20 minutes from the horizon. She knows all of that. She takes his hand, both of hers, around his one. She holds it the way you hold something you thought was gone. That is all. That is enough. It is more than enough, and she knows he knows it, and the knowing passes between them without requiring words, which is fortunate, because neither of them has any left that would be adequate. She's stable, Obi-Wan says from 5 meters away. His voice is quiet, and carries the specific quality of a man protecting a moment by drawing its boundary before the moment runs past the point of grace. I'm glad. We have approximately 15 minutes before Palpatine's shuttle enters sensor range. A beat, so brief it barely qualifies. I suggest we use them. Anakin lifts his head. Padmé's eyes move to Obi-Wan. She takes him in. His presence, his saber at his hip, the deliberate steadiness of him, and the part of her that has been a senator since she was 24, and a political operative since before that wakes up behind her eyes before the rest of her has finished arriving. Tell me the plan, she says. Her voice is thin. It will not carry far. But the authority in it is not diminished by volume, and has never once in her life required it. Anakin begins quickly, the shape of it, the broad strokes, a trap, the landing pad, Palpatine arriving expecting to find a broken and grateful weapon. Padmé listens. She asks one question, not for clarification but because she has already identified the gap in the architecture, and she does not have the patience or the time to wait for him to find it himself. If you kill him without documentation, she says, The Senate will call it a coup. Jedi assassinating the Supreme Chancellor. You'll lose everything before it begins. Her hands tighten fractionally around his. You need his confession. Or his crimes. The pause is barely a breath. His recorded crimes. Obi-Wan looks at her. There is something in his expression that is not quite admiration, and not quite surprise, and is in fact the specific look of a man recognizing that he should not have been surprised. Anakin looks at her too. His hands have stopped shaking. For one moment, 10 seconds perhaps, the three of them exist together in the volcanic dark, with the planet burning its ancient indifferent fire around them, and the approaching shadow of what is coming still 20 minutes from the horizon. And the moment is tender in the way that things are tender when they have been paid for. When the cost was real, and the arrival is not a gift, but a thing that was built, deliberately, out of the rubble of the thing that failed. Then Anakin raises his eyes to the sky. There is a change in his face that has nothing to do with the sky's appearance, because the sky looks the same as it has looked for the last hour. Sulfur orange and churning and indifferent. The change is in what he knows is moving through it, beyond the range of any sensor on this skiff, on a precise approach vector he can calculate from memory, because he has traveled it hundreds of times in the other direction. He gets to his feet. His hands are steadier now than they were 30 seconds ago, not fully recovered. But enough. We need to record everything, he says, and we need to do it from the landing pad. The plan is not complicated. That, Anakin explains, is its first and most important virtue. He is standing. His hands have mostly stopped shaking. The force presence that the healing cost him is still diminished, banked down to something that requires attention to detect, but his mind is running at a different register entirely. Sharp and cold and preternaturally precise in the way that minds become when they have 23 years of tactical experience and approximately 12 minutes to spend it. He speaks quickly. He does not pace. He has learned, in the life he carries, that pacing is what people do when they are working through a plan. He has already worked through this one. What he is doing now is transmitting it. Obi-Wan listens with his arms at his sides and his weight slightly forward, the posture of a man receiving a briefing he intends to critique, but hasn't found the flaw in yet. Padmé listens from the skiff's boarding ramp, where she has managed to sit upright with the assistance of the secondary droid, and the specific determination of someone who refuses to receive critical tactical information lying down. She is still pale. She is still fragile in a way that neither of them will say out loud. She is also already making the expression she makes when she is 3 steps ahead of a conversation and waiting for everyone else to arrive. The plan, Anakin says, begins with what Palpatine expects to find. He has constructed this moment for decades. That much must be understood before anything else. The arrival on Mustafar, the Chancellor descending in his personal shuttle to collect the wreckage of his apprentice, is not improvised. It is the final movement of something Palpatine began composing before Anakin was born, before his mother was born, in the patient Sith architecture of a plan that requires its pieces to be in specific positions at the moment of activation. He needs Anakin broken. He needs him grateful. He needs him to understand, in the marrow of his newly destroyed life, that the only thing standing between him and death is the Sith Master who arranged the destruction in the first place. Palpatine will arrive expecting to find a man in agony. He will arrive expecting to find someone who has just lost everything he loved, who has felt his wife go cold in his hands, who has been defeated by his former master, who is lying on black volcanic rock with burned lungs and no future, and nothing left to offer, except his continued willingness to serve. He will arrive, in other words, with his guard in exactly the wrong position. Not down, Palpatine's guard is never simply down, but angled. Facing inward, toward the broken thing he expects to manage. Rather than outward, toward a threat he has not calculated, because he has never once considered that this particular variable could run the wrong direction. That miscalculation, Anakin says, is the trap. The mechanics are straightforward. Obi-Wan takes Padmé aboard the Naboo skiff and moves it to the far side of the facility, the western maintenance approach, where the equipment housings provide cover, and the cliff face behind them absorbs the shuttle's sensor sweep. Engines dark, all emissions suppressed. The skiff becomes invisible to anything that is not looking for it specifically, and Palpatine will not be looking for it. He will be looking at the landing pad. Padmé opens the skiff's communication array. She begins recording. Audio at minimum. The array's directional sensitivity, properly calibrated, can capture clear sound from the landing pad at that distance. She records everything that happens from the moment Palpatine's boots touch the pad. His voice, his words. Whatever he says in the presence of what he believes is his helpless and captive instrument. His recorded crimes, as she put it. When Anakin triggers the signal, a force pulse, clean and brief, directed at Obi-Wan rather than broadcast, Obi-Wan brings the skiff around on the eastern approach. He comes in fast and puts down on the pad's far edge. Second blade. Extraction vehicle. The force pulse is the word now, delivered in the way that brothers deliver words without speaking them, in the channel between two people who spent 12 years learning each other's frequency. And Anakin goes to the landing pad. He goes to the landing pad, Anakin says, and he lies down. The force suppression is the part that requires explanation. He knows the dark side's texture. This is not something that requires pride or shame in its stating. It is simply true in the way that any 23-year fact is true. He knows what the dark side weighs. He knows how it sits in the force, the specific quality of its presence, the cold compression of it, the way it bends the light of the living force around itself, the way a collapsed star bends light, drawing everything inward and releasing nothing. He knows what a man who has lived inside it for 2 decades radiates when he is critically injured. Not nothing, but close to nothing, a signature collapsing toward zero, a fire that is almost out. He has felt it from the outside, from the other side of the bond, in the moments when other Sith were dying and he stood over them. He will not use the dark side. He is done with using it, and more importantly, he does not need it for what this requires. What this requires is camouflage. He will compress the light, push it down into a narrow band, hold his breath in the force the way a man holds his breath underwater, and drape the memory of the darkness over it like a hood. He spent 23 years knowing exactly what Darth Vader's force presence felt like from the inside. He can replicate the signature of a man who is almost dead. He cannot hold it indefinitely. It is not a sustainable deception. It requires the constant attention of a thing actively performed rather than naturally expressed. But 10 minutes is not indefinitely. 10 minutes is nothing. Obi-Wan speaks. His voice is quiet and carries the specific weight of a question that already knows it is going to be overruled, and is asking anyway. You're certain you can hold the suppression? After the healing? Anakin looks at him. Something moves through his expression that is not quite humor, and not quite grief, and occupies the space between them without resolving into either. I held a mask in place for 23 years, Obi-Wan. He says it without emphasis, without bitterness, as a straightforward statement of demonstrated capability. 10 minutes is nothing. The silence that follows is not empty. Obi-Wan fills it with the thing he does not say, which is that a mask maintained under duress, and a mask deployed voluntarily after an hour of emotional devastation and physical depletion, are not the same object, however similar they look from the outside. That was a different kind of mask, he says. Anakin does not disagree. He does not have time to disagree, and the disagreement would not change the plan. He turns to Padmé. He does not linger. He has learned, in the life he carries, what happens when leavings become ceremonies. He takes her hand, the one that held his on the cooling rock 20 minutes ago, the one that said what there was no time to say, and presses it once, briefly, with both of his. He releases it. He looks at Obi-Wan with the expression of a man who has said everything important, and is now speaking in the register they developed across 12 years of walking into rooms that were trying to kill them. Same as always, he says. I make it complicated. You make it work. Obi-Wan's response arrives without hesitation, in the same register from the same 12 years. Try not to get killed before I arrive. A beat. If I do, Anakin says, you'll know where to find him. End it anyway. There is nothing light about what the exchange is carrying. There is something light about the way it is carried. That distinction is the whole of what they learned together, across every battlefield and every morning after and every mission that should have killed them and decided not to. Armor made of humor, the only kind they ever learned to build out of each other. He turns and walks toward the landing pad without looking back. He lies down on the black rock. He positions himself with the precise, deliberate care of a man who knows exactly what the specific arrangement of a broken body looks like, because he has stood over enough of them, and one of them was his own. On his side, facing the facility wall, one arm extended, the other folded under him, his head at the angle of someone who collapsed rather than chose. He grinds his cheek into the black volcanic grit and lets it cover what the ash from the bank below hasn't already reached. Then he closes his eyes. And he does the thing he was not sure he would be able to do until this moment. He reaches inward, not outward, not through the force toward someone else, but into the space that the last 23 years have occupied, into the memory that is not quite memory, because it is also not quite past. He finds the weight of the armor, the specific pressure of it, the hermetic constriction, every joint fused with durasteel and purpose, every breath measured and mechanical, air arriving not from the world, but from the machine. He finds the quality of the darkness from the inside, not the rage, not the grief, but the texture. The specific cold signature of a man who has pressed every light in himself down so far for so long that the pressing has become the baseline. He wraps himself in it. The light goes very quiet. Not gone. He can feel it, the way you feel a held breath, present, contained, waiting, but from the outside, from the perspective of someone reaching into the force on this landing pad looking for a living force signature, what they will find is almost nothing. A faint, collapsing pulse, a fire at the very end of its fuel, a dying man. He waits. The shuttle arrives the way Palpatine arrives at everything. Before it is visible, it is audible, a distinctive engine signature, heavier and more deliberate than a standard transport, carrying the specific harmonic frequency of a vessel that was built not for speed or cargo, but for the communication of certainty. It descends through Mustafar's churning upper atmosphere and the volcanic cloud cover and the sulfur haze of the facility's elevation. And its silhouette resolves from the orange murk in the shape that Anakin knows from the inside of 2.5 decades. 3 forward-swept wings, dark hull, the personal conveyance of the most dangerous being in the galaxy, arriving precisely when he said he would. Landing struts deploy. The pad shudders faintly beneath the shuttle's weight. The boarding ramp descends. Boots on durasteel. Then boots on black volcanic rock. Multiple sets, the shock troopers, deploying in a practiced formation, fanning to cover the pad's perimeter with the automatic efficiency of men who have performed this function before, without needing to think about it. They are not looking for a threat. They are not positioned against one. They are here because this is how the Emperor moves, surrounded by the symbols of force rather than force itself, because the force itself is always already him. And then, between their formation, a different cadence. Not hurried, not cautious, the footsteps of a man who has never needed to calculate whether the room he is entering might be dangerous. Because the rooms are always dangerous, and he has always been the most dangerous thing in them. Unhurried in the way that water is unhurried moving downhill. Inevitable in the way that only things are inevitable that have been put in motion over decades and have been moving, without interruption, ever since. The footsteps cross the pad. They slow. They stop. Anakin keeps his eyes closed and his breath shallow and his force presence compressed to almost nothing, and he does not move, does not twitch, does not allow any part of his surface to betray the thing that is happening beneath it. The held breath of the light, patient and ready and waiting for the precise right moment, coiled under 23 years of practiced darkness like a blade under a coat. He feels the air change as the figure crouches above him. He feels the force reach down toward him, probing, precise, the touch of a Sith master searching for the signature of his instrument, expecting to find it wounded and diminished, and fundamentally, gratifyingly, the probe finds almost nothing. Almost nothing is exactly what Palpatine expected. He reaches out his hand. Palpatine's hand lands on Anakin's shoulder, and Anakin moves, Not the gradual, effortful movement of a critically injured man, not the slow resurfacing of consciousness. The movement of someone who has been lying absolutely still for 9 minutes, not because he was incapable of moving, but because he was choosing not to, and has now chosen. It is the difference between a held breath and an exhaled one, between a coiled thing and the thing it becomes when it releases. His right hand comes off the volcanic rock and closes around Palpatine's wrist before the Emperor's fingers have fully registered the shoulder beneath them. The grip is calibrated. This is important to understand. Not frantic, not punishing beyond specific necessity. Calibrated, from 23 years of precise knowledge about the tensile strength of those particular bones, the exact pressure required to hold without breaking, the angle at which a wrist becomes a lever. He does not want Palpatine broken yet. He wants Palpatine's hand accounted for. The force suppression drops away. All of it. All at once. What happens in the Force in that instant has no adequate comparison in the physical world, except perhaps this. Imagine a room that has been sealed and dark for 2 decades, every window shuttered, every lamp cold, and then all the shutters open simultaneously, and it is noon. The living Force signature of the Chosen One, compressed for 9 minutes into a band so narrow it registered as near death, held in place by the discipline of a man who spent 23 years learning what darkness feels like from the inside, erupts back into the open like something that was never meant to be contained. It does not spread. It detonates. Clean and vast and of a quality that has no equivalent in the dark side's vocabulary. Because the dark side has no vocabulary for this. For light that has processed grief and emerged on the other side still light. For the specific frequency of a man who has been to the worst version of himself and returned without flinching from what he found there. Palpatine feels it before he understands it. He has not felt genuine surprise in perhaps 40 years. He has felt the anticipation of outcomes, the minor adjustments of plans encountering variables, the slight recalibrations of a man whose model of events is sophisticated enough to accommodate most deviations. He has not felt the specific animal shock of something his model did not contain and cannot immediately process. His body registers it before his mind does, a cold contraction in the chest, a narrowing of the eyes that is involuntary, a fractional stiffening of the arm that Anakin's hand is currently directing. Something he has never experienced in his life as a Sith. Real fear, not manufactured, not the controlled pressure he administers to others with the precision of a physician with a scalpel. The kind that arrives without announcement in the body of a man who realizes, in a single instant, that the room he believed he controlled has a door he didn't know existed, and it has just opened. Anakin opens his eyes. They are blue. Impossibly, infuriatingly, completely blue, the blue of someone who has no shadow left in him, who has carried the dark side's full weight for 23 years and put it down at last on a volcanic bank in the ash, who has come back through the worst of himself and brought his own eyes with him. It is not the blue of a young man who has not yet known darkness. It is the blue of a man who has known nothing but darkness, and chosen, with full information, to be done with it. He is almost smiling. Not the reckless, open grin of Anakin at 22. Something different. Quieter. The expression of a man who has seen every trick in a very specific opponent's repertoire, and is looking at that opponent now from the other side of all of them. Hello, Master. The word is the deliberate inversion of everything it has ever meant between them. You look like you've seen a ghost. Palpatine says nothing for the half-second it takes his 60 years of Sith discipline to reassert control over his face. His voice, when it arrives, is very quiet. The quietness of someone who is recalculating at speed and not yet ready to broadcast the recalculation. What are you? Anakin pulls. His grip on the wrist becomes a lever and a direction. He comes off the volcanic rock in a single motion, to his feet, already moving, using the momentum of the rise to spin Palpatine's arm outward and bring the Emperor with it, off balance, rotated, dragged away from the shock troopers behind him, away from the shuttle's boarding ramp, toward the open center of the landing pad where there is nothing to duck behind, and nowhere to tactically retreat. And where a man fighting on the wrong side of a surprise has nothing to work with. I'm what the prophecy actually meant, Anakin says. You should have read it more carefully. From the far end of the pad, a blue lightsaber ignites. Obi-Wan Kenobi drops from the maintenance ledge above and behind the shock trooper formation, with the economy of a man who has spent 12 years landing on things that were not designed to be landed on, and has stopped finding it remarkable. He hits the volcanic rock in a controlled descent, and straightens into the guard stance of a man who is not performing combat readiness, but simply is it. The master of Sorisu, the greatest defensive swordsman of his era, back in the posture that is more natural to him than standing still. He has not been this man for the last hour. He has been a man in grief, in shock, in the careful assembly of himself back into functional shape. He is this man now. Something is alive in his eyes that was absent on the lava bank and on the lower sand. Not anger, not vengeance, but purpose. He is fighting for something again. The difference is visible across the entire width of the pad. In the same motion, without breaking stride, he draws Anakin's recovered blade from his belt, the one he took from the riverbank's edge as he descended, and sends it across the pad to Anakin in a single clean arc. Anakin catches it, without looking. Obi-Wan places himself between the shock troopers and the Emperor, with the unhurried deliberateness of someone who has calculated exactly how many of them he can manage simultaneously, and found the number sufficient. The troopers have their weapons raised. They have been raised since the moment the boarding ramp came down, and they are still raised and they have not yet fired, because the situation has not conformed to any briefing they received, and men who have not received relevant briefings tend to hesitate, which is precisely the 3 seconds Obi-Wan needs. Stand down. His voice is carrying the deceptive calm of someone who uses quiet as a tactical instrument. The Emperor is not who you believe him to be. You have been lied to. He shifts his weight fractionally, his blade between them and the pad's center, the geometry of his stance making any angle of attack more costly than its alternative. Your chips have been lied into you. I know that means nothing to you right now. He holds their eyes, one cluster of white armored faces after another. In a few days it will. He does not expect them to comply. He is already fighting. He is also planting something. The saber in his hand ignites. Blue, his own blade, the one he carried as a Jedi, taken from the riverbank and now returned to his hand where it belongs, burns steady in his grip. Not a new color, a new hand holding it. The light of someone who has nothing left to perform and nothing left to hide, and who is, for the first time in longer than he can calculate, completely himself. 3 presences occupy the landing pad. On one side, the absolute cold of the dark side at its apex. 1,000 years of Sith mastery condensed into a single robed figure with yellow eyes, and the patience of something that has been winning for so long it has nearly forgotten what opposition feels like. On the other 2 sides, something that has not existed in the galaxy before this moment. The partnership that was always, from the prophecy's first utterance, supposed to be the answer. The chosen one and the master who trained him, standing on the same side, holding the same color of blade, fighting for the same thing at last. Sidious raises his hands. Anakin and Obi-Wan move. The first clash of blades rings out across the volcanic dark, and the sound of it travels down the lava river, and the planet does not stop burning, and does not start caring, and the 3 of them begin. This fight has never happened. In any timeline, in any version of events, in any configuration of the galaxy's long and catastrophic history, this specific encounter, these 3 specific people, in these specific positions on this specific volcanic rock, has never occurred. Palpatine has fought 2 opponents simultaneously before. He has done it easily. What he has not done, in 60-odd years of Sith mastery, is fight 2 opponents simultaneously who both understand exactly what he is, and have spent the last hour planning for it. The difference is not one of degree. It is categorical. He understands this within the first 3 seconds. Obi-Wan does not attack. This is the first thing Sidious has to process, and it costs him. Kenobi's blade is a blue line that goes wherever it needs to go and nowhere else. The minimum necessary motion to place Durasteel between Palpatine's strikes and Palpatine's intended targets. The form of Soresu running at the level of reflex rather than decision. His body a closed system that absorbs force without amplifying it and returns nothing except position. Every time Palpatine drives at him, Kenobi gives him a parry and takes a step. A step to the side. A step that costs nothing and gains everything. Another angle. another inch of pad, another increment of flanking pressure. He is the anvil. He is content to be the anvil. The anvil does not need to win. It only needs to still be there when the hammer falls. Anakin is the hammer. What Anakin does cannot be named precisely, because it was never formally taught, and does not exist in any Jedi text. Because the man who developed it spent 23 years building it in the dark without access to a library. It is recognizably gem-so in its bones, the aggressive form, the power strikes, the offensive pressure that does not permit a settling of weight or a regrouping of guard. But married to something that gem-so's architects never designed it to carry, the complete force sensitivity of the Chosen One, fully open, uncorrupted, reading the fight at a depth that renders the next 3 moves visible before they happen. Palpatine can read the future through the dark side. This is one of his greatest advantages. He has used it in every significant encounter of his adult life, the slight foreknowledge, the half-second ahead, the ability to position his blade where the opponent's strike will arrive, rather than where it is. Anakin's fighting style comes from a future that no longer exists. Palpatine cannot see it. It is, in the most precise possible sense, outside the range of everything he has ever learned to perceive, drawn from a timeline his power cannot reach, developed in a version of events his dark side has no access to. Every combination Anakin throws is drawn from 23 years of a war that isn't happening. Every feint is calibrated to a version of this fight that nobody else experienced. He is, to Sidious's future sight, completely unpredictable, and the Chosen One driving that unpredictability is operating at his full capacity for the first time in 2 decades. The pad becomes a confined geography of 3 moving bodies and the light between their blades. Palpatine shifts. Direct power against Kenobi costs too much and produces nothing. Direct power against Anakin produces results but insufficient results. Anakin is absorbing strikes that should stagger him and pressing forward, undeterred. His force connection replenishing what the combat costs faster than the combat can cost it. The calculation changes. Palpatine recalculates, 3 seconds of pure tactical intelligence rerouting itself in real time, and reaches for the weapon that has never failed him. He raises both hands toward Anakin, and the sky between them turns white. Force lightning at full expression is not a metaphor, and not a theatrical choice. It is the dark side's most complete statement of intent, raw destruction given electrical form, channeled through a body that has spent decades converting itself into a conductor of pure malice. It arcs from his fingertips and crosses the 8 feet between them in no time at all, the sound of it a sustained crack that the volcanic background cannot swallow. And Anakin catches it. His hands come up, both of them, open-palmed, and the lightning hits them and stops. No scream, no burn, no collapse. The audience expects a body falling backward, because the body has always fallen backward, because this is what this weapon does, and has always done. Instead, silence where the pain should be. Anakin's jaw is set. His feet have not moved. The lightning is coursing through his hands and into his arms, and through his 22-year-old organic body, with its 20,000 midi-chlorians per cell, and its complete uncorrupted fully open connection to the living force. And the force is accepting the charge the way the ground accepts water. Not destroyed by it. Not overwhelmed. Simply larger than what is being poured into it. He holds the lightning for 3 full seconds. Then he raises his hands toward the sky and releases it upward, not back at Palpatine, not weaponized, not turned into a counter-assault. Upward. A column of blue-white discharge that climbs above the facility and illuminates the churning volcanic atmosphere for a 1/4 mile in every direction before it dissipates into the sulfur clouds above. Released, not used. Let go. The silence that follows is the loudest thing on the pad. Anakin lowers his hands. He is breathing hard. His palms are faintly luminescent with residual charge. He looks at Palpatine with an expression that is almost, gentle. I watched you do this to Luke for almost a minute. His voice is conversational in the way that voices are conversational when they are very deliberately not being anything else. He didn't have my hands. A beat, the length of a single breath. Come on. Palpatine does not give him the reaction. He is already recalibrating again, Because recalibration is the only mode available to a man whose primary weapon has just been absorbed and discharged harmlessly into the sky by a 22-year-old with blue eyes. He does what he does when power is insufficient. He fights and talks simultaneously. This is his most dangerous configuration, not because it divides his attention, because it does not, but because language is itself a weapon when wielded by someone who has spent 60 years identifying exactly which words open, exactly which doors, in exactly which people. Your wife, Anakin. He drives a sequence of strikes at Anakin's guard while he speaks. Not hard enough to commit, hard enough to require response, keeping Anakin's attention split. Think about your wife. You saved her today. Today, he feints high and cuts low, and Anakin reads it from somewhere outside the timeline and parries clean. What about tomorrow? What about in a year? In 5? He is circling, keeping Obi-Wan in his peripheral awareness, calculating angles. The dark side is the only path to true preservation. You know this. You chose it once, because you understood. Anakin's blade meets his in a grinding lock. Not a defensive lock. An offensive one. He has stepped forward into Palpatine's attack rather than away from it. Closed the distance, brought the two weapons into contact at close range where Palpatine's longer lever strikes cannot develop full momentum. His face is 6 inches from the yellow eyes. I know what's on the other side of losing everyone you love, he says. His voice is not loud. It does not need to be. I've been there. The lock holds. Neither blade moves. It's just darkness. His weight increases against the lock, incrementally, testing, and eventually even the darkness ends. The lock breaks. He drives forward. Palpatine gives ground for the first time on the pad, 2 steps, then 3, his heels finding the edge of a cracked volcanic seam in the rock and using it to redirect rather than retreat. His face is a controlled surface. Underneath it, the recalculation is running faster. You have nothing I want, Anakin says. He is not performing the line. He is reporting it, the way you report a fact you have verified personally across 23 years of evidence. The dark side had offered him everything it had, and he lived in the result, and he knows what the result looks like from the inside. And the inside is the answer to every offer Palpatine has ever made. They find a rhythm. It takes no discussion. It requires no eye contact, no signal, no negotiation. It is the product of 12 years of fighting in the same rooms against the same kind of enemy. 12 years of learning the shape of how the other person moves at the moment before they move it. 12 years of a partnership operating at the level below language where the body simply knows. Obi-Wan reads the line of Anakin's next attack, the shoulder angle, the weight shift, the slight rotation of the blade that in Gem So precedes a diagonal drive, and moves. Not toward Palpatine. Around him. 3 steps to the left while Anakin drives from the right, placing himself on Palpatine's blind side with his blade at the exact height and angle that forces the Emperor to split his attention between a threat he is tracking and a threat he is now behind. Palpatine blocks Anakin's diagonal and turns to meet Kenobi, and Anakin is already adjusting. Not the attack he telegraphed, a different one. Because the telegraph was information, and the information has been spent, and now the real strike comes from a direction Palpatine has just vacated his defense from. Sidious parries it. But he is late. For the first time in the fight, he is late. By a fraction, half a beat, the difference between a clean parry and a parry that costs something. A parry that leaves his weight in the wrong place, and his guard overextended for the quarter second it takes to recover. He recovers. He is too skilled not to recover. But he felt the lateness, and he knows they felt it too. He leaps, not retreat, reset. The facility's upper maintenance tier is 4 meters above the pad, accessible from the eastern edge where a structural support rises in a ledge. He goes up and toward it with force-augmented speed, his robes clearing the pad's surface, the volcanic light catching him as he rises, gaining altitude, gaining separation, reaching for the angle from above that might open options the ground-level geometry of this fight has denied him. Anakin follows. The same muscles, the same trajectory, the same arc, the same explosive burst of force, augmented power that was coiled in this body this morning for a very different destination. On the lower bank of the lava river, an hour ago, those legs bent for a leap that was going to end the galaxy. Here, now, they propel him upward toward the same target, the same body, the same silhouette against the volcanic sky. And the only thing different is everything. What the leap is for. Who is making it. What he will do when he arrives. He lands on the upper tier 2 seconds after Palpatine does. Obi-Wan takes the structural support at a run and comes up the eastern ledge on the far side, arriving to form the other point of a triangle, Palpatine between them. Backed against the facility wall above the lava river, with the black volcanic drop behind him and 2 blue blades in front. For the first time since the boarding ramp came down, Sidious is still. His yellow eyes move between them. Not panicked. Calculating. Always calculating. The assessment of a man who has never stopped fighting even while appearing to do nothing, whose stillness is itself a form of preparation. He is looking at the geometry of what is in front of him, and finding, for the first time in 60 years of being the most dangerous thing in any room, that the geometry does not contain a winning path. Not through power. Not through speech. He reaches into the force bond between himself and Anakin, the master-apprentice connection. Still technically present, the thread of it not yet severed, and he pushes. Not a physical attack. Something else. Something older and more precise and targeted at the one door he has always been able to open in Anakin Skywalker. He constructs a vision. The vision arrives through the force bond like a hand reaching through a wall. It is precisely constructed. Palpatine has had 23 years to understand the exact architecture of Anakin Skywalker's fear. Not the general category of loss, but the specific room where the fear lives. The specific light quality of it. The specific face at the center. He builds it the way he builds everything, with patience, with precision, with the intimate knowledge of a man who has spent decades studying a lock before choosing the key. The vision is a medical facility. Clinical white light. The sound of machinery registering a decline. A table. And on the table, Padmé. Her face at the angle of something departing. Her color the specific gray of a fire that has found no more fuel. It is the nightmare that ended the galaxy. The first time. Anakin stops walking. Not because the vision has worked. Because it requires a moment to be what it is. To receive it fully. To let it be present without flinching away, which is the only way to confirm what he already knows. He lets it land. He looks at the medical table and the white lights, and the face he has loved across 2 lifetimes, and he lets himself feel the full weight of it, the specific gravity of that particular loss, the thing that was so unbearable the first time he felt its approach, that he burned the galaxy down rather than face it. He has faced it. He spent 23 years facing it. He knows every room in that grief, the entryway and the deep interior and the furthest reaches where a man lives, when he has nothing left to organize his days around except the machinery of his own continuing. He has been in all of them. He knows what they contain. He starts walking again. The vision plays around him as he moves. It is still there, the table, the lights, Padmé's face, rendered with the fidelity of a Sith master at full concentration. Real enough to register in the peripheral force sense as genuine. Real enough that a man who had not been through the reality it represents would have been brought to his knees by it. Anakin walks through it the way a man walks through a room he has memorized in the dark, not because it is not affecting him, because it has already done everything it was capable of doing, in the other timeline, and he survived it, and he came back, and he is here. Palpatine is 2 meters away. That's the vision, Anakin says. His voice is almost gentle. The gentleness of someone encountering an old exhausted thing and recognizing it for what it is. That's the one. He keeps walking. I know this vision. I sat across from you in the opera house, and you told me the dark side could prevent death, and that night I had it for the first time. I chose the dark side because of this vision. He is a meter away now, and the white lights of the constructed medical facility are still playing at the edges of his force perception, and he is not stopping for them. I know exactly what comes after it. The darkness, and then the armor, and then 23 years of carrying what I did because of it. He stops. He is close enough to see the yellow eyes clearly, to see the calculation still running in them, to see the moment the calculation begins to find no path forward. It's not real. A beat. And even if it were, something moves through his face. Not defiance. Something quieter and much harder to argue with. I already know I can survive it. I already have. Palpatine releases the vision, not because he chooses to, because it is costing him concentration he cannot afford to spend here, with 2 Jedi within striking distance and his power reserves no longer what they were at the start of this fight. The white lights in the medical table and Padmé's constructed face dissolve into the volcanic air of Mustafar and leave nothing behind except the upper maintenance tier, and the lava river below, and the facility wall at Palpatine's back, and the 2 blue blades in front of him. The last gambit has been spent. His face does not change. It is one of the extraordinary things about him, that the face reveals nothing even now, at the bottom of options with the full weight of what is happening fully understood. He has been the most dangerous thing in every room he has ever entered. He has accepted this moment's verdict without permitting it to show. He straightens. "You are making a mistake," he says, not desperately. As a man delivers a final assessment, precisely, without investment in whether it is received, because accuracy is its own obligation. The galaxy requires order. What you are protecting will not survive without. The galaxy required 23 years of darkness because of you. Anakin's voice is flat and complete. I've seen it. Every year of it. I was it. He meets the yellow eyes one last time and says the thing that is simply, verifiably, absolutely true. There is no fear left in me. Not of losing. Not of you. Sidious commits. There is nothing else. The options have been exhausted one by one. Power, speech, manipulation, the force bond, the manufactured vision, the targeted assault on the specific vulnerability that has always been the key. And they have all failed against a man who has been vaccinated against all of them by the experience of their consequences. What remains is the final full expression of 60 years of dark side mastery, directed at full force toward a single point. Because if it does not work, then nothing will. And he has always preferred to know than to wonder. The lightning comes again, not as it came before, targeted, sustained, a demonstration. Everything, his hands extended, his body channeling every reserve he has, the dark side pouring through him in its complete expression, the full weight of 1,000 years of Sith lineage, the accumulated power of a man who was fed on fear and suffering and submission for his entire adult life, and stored it all somewhere that he now empties completely toward Anakin, sustained and absolute. Anakin opens his hands. He opens them and opens himself with them, not reaching outward, not throwing anything back, but receiving, the way he learned to receive from Padmé on the rock an hour ago. The living force of the Chosen One, fully unlocked, not divided between light and dark, not partially accessed through a suit's limitations, not compressed behind grief or rage or 23 years of identity constructed from someone else's design. All of it. The complete and unobstructed channel, receiving what Palpatine sends the way the ground receives rain. The dark side has no purchase. This is what Palpatine never understood about the thing he created. The dark side requires something to hold on to. It requires a crack, fear, grief, the specific pressure point where a person's love becomes leverage. It is not a river that runs on its own. It is a river that runs through the channels that suffering carves. Anakin has no channels left for it to run through. Every crack the dark side ever used in him has been inhabited and understood, and wept over and accepted and integrated across 23 years of living inside the result. And there is nothing in him now that does not know what the dark side costs, and nothing in him that is willing to pay it again. The lightning pours through him and into the living force, and the living force holds it, and holds it. And Palpatine empties. When it is over, it is quiet. Sidious stands. He is standing because he has not yet completed the motion of not standing, because the body does not always receive the information at the same speed as everything else. His hands are still raised. His yellow eyes are still open, but the dark side that has animated those eyes and those hands and that face for 6 decades is spent. Not wounded. Not driven back. Spent, it has poured everything it had into a vessel that could contain it, and the vessel was not broken by it, and there is nothing left. He is, for the first time in his life, simply a man. Anakin's blade moves once. Clean, swift, without ceremony, without satisfaction, without any of the performance that violence usually requires to justify itself. The same decisiveness with which he has made every choice in the last hour. Direct, deliberate. The act of a man who knows exactly what he is doing and does not need it to feel like anything except what it is. Darth Sidious falls. The body of Sheev Palpatine, Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic, Dark Lord of the Sith, architect of an empire that will not now be built, settles against the volcanic rock of the Mustafar upper tier and is still. The 1,000 years of careful, patient evil that he embodied, the rule of 2, the long patient infiltration, the decade of manufactured crisis and orchestrated war, ends here. On an undistinguished piece of facility maintenance platform above a lava river that does not care and never will. In the Force, Obi-Wan feels it like a room-changing pressure. He has been bracing against something for so long, without fully recognizing he was bracing, that its removal is almost physical. The specific sensation of a weight being lifted from a structure that had built its entire architecture around supporting it, and now must learn, rapidly, what shape it takes when the weight is gone. The Force, around this facility, around this planet, around the space where Darth Sidious was, clarifies, not dramatically, not with sound or light, simply becomes more itself. Cleaner. The frequency of the living force, previously distorted by the proximity of something that bent everything toward its own center, settling back toward the neutral. He breathes. It is the first full breath he has taken in approximately 19 hours. Anakin stands over the body. He does not feel triumph. He knows what triumph feels like. He has felt it dozens of times across 23 years, the hollow rewarded sensation of a Sith Lord given confirmation that his function has been performed, that his master's plan has advanced, that another problem has been removed from the board. This is not that. This is not even relief, exactly, though relief is somewhere in the region of what is happening. It is something quieter and harder to name. The shape of an absence. The specific feeling of a space where a thing used to press against you, finally empty. Something that might become peace. In time. Not yet. He turns. Obi-Wan is 3 meters away on the upper tier, his blade still active, his face doing the thing it does when it is working very hard to remain composed, and is partially succeeding. He has been a witness to something that has never happened before in the history of the galaxy, and will take years to fully understand, and decades to fully account for. He is holding all of that with characteristic precision, organizing it into compartments that will be opened later, one at a time, at a pace the human interior can manage. Is she recording? Anakin asks. Obi-Wan is quiet for a slight, careful pause. Since the moment the boarding ramp came down. Anakin looks at the body again. At the robe and the still hands, and the face that wore 2 expressions for 60 years, and is now wearing neither. At the 1,000 years of accumulated Sith patience and violence and architecture, finished at the man who took his mother's freedom and his own childhood and his wife's life and his children's parents and 23 years of whatever he might have been, if left to himself. Good, he says. He deactivates his blade. The blue light goes out. The volcanic dark comes back around them, and the lava river's ancient sound and the wind carrying its sulfur load across the facility, and the distant rearrangement of rock somewhere below, the planet's old, slow business, indifferent as always, continuing. The galaxy, Anakin says, is going to need the recording. The skiff clears Mustafar's atmosphere and the volcanic light goes out. One moment the viewport is the color of everything burning, the geological orange and red of a world that has spent 4 billion years consuming itself, and then the skiff crosses the upper thermosphere and there is simply black. Stars. The quiet of space, which is not actually quiet but which is, after the last 2 hours. so profoundly absent of sound that it registers in the body as silence the way the absence of pain registers, not as nothing, but as the specific, almost overwhelming sensation of a thing that was present no longer being so. Obi-Wan has the controls. Anakin is in the passenger compartment with Padmé. She has been in labor for 40 minutes. This is the information the medical droid delivered with characteristic clinical neutrality as they carried her aboard. The same droid that told Anakin her vitals were inexplicable 45 minutes ago, and is now telling him that the inexplicable has resolved, and replaced itself with something entirely explicable, and immediate, and requiring attention. The twins are full term. They have been full term. The events of the last 2 hours, the force drain, the healing, the fight, the volcanic air, the sustained physical stress of a body that was being unmade at the cellular level and then remade, have accelerated the process that was already complete. Anakin holds her hand. He has not released it since the boarding ramp. Padmé's face, between contractions, is the face of someone who has survived an assassination attempt, a force choking, a volcanic planet's worth of sulfur, a near-death experience at the molecular level, and a front-row view of her husband killing the Emperor of the galaxy. She is exhausted in a way that goes below the cellular. She is also entirely, characteristically, furiously present, tracking the droid's readout with the focused attention of a senator reviewing legislation she suspects of containing hidden language. "How long?" she asks. Her voice is thin, but its authority is intact. "Polis massa," Anakin says. 20 minutes. She nods once, files it, adjusts her breathing with the deliberate precision of someone who has decided she is going to manage this the way she manages everything, through information, preparation, and the absolute refusal to be anything other than in control of what she can control. He watches her and does not say the thing that is running underneath every other thought he has, which is, "You are alive. You are alive. You are alive." Polis Massa is an asteroid in the outer rim, dark and airless, its interior a network of pressurized medical tunnels carved into pale rock. The base was established for archaeological research and has since become one of the quietest medical facilities in the galaxy. Small, clean, staffed by beings who came here specifically because they preferred the work to the recognition. The skiff docks in the lower bay. Bail Organa is already there. He is standing at the bay entrance in the clothes of someone who was not expecting to be here tonight, and has been here for 2 hours anyway. The posture of a man whose intelligence network told him something had gone catastrophically wrong on Mustafar, and who came because coming is what he does when the people he respects are in danger. His expression when the boarding ramp descends and he sees Anakin Skywalker, alive and standing, carrying Padmé with Obi-Wan Kenobi at his side, goes through 4 distinct stages in approximately 2 seconds. The 4th stage settles into something that is not quite relief and not quite confusion, and will require several hours of conversation to fully resolve. "Senator," Anakin says. Skywalker, Bail looks at him for a long moment. He takes in the ash on his skin and the blue eyes, and the way he is holding Padmé, not as a man holding something precious and fragile, but as a man holding something that is his and that he is not letting go of. Something in his assessment shifts. The medical team is ready. "Good," Obi-Wan says, from somewhere behind Anakin. "We'll explain everything." After, the delivery room is white and humming and completely indifferent to everything that preceded its use tonight. This is, Anakin thinks, one of the stranger qualities of the universe, its total unwillingness to acknowledge context. The room does not know it is receiving the children of the man who just killed Palpatine. It does not know that 40 minutes ago its current occupant was being drained of life force on a volcanic planet. It knows nothing. It hums. Its equipment is calibrated. Its temperature is regulated. The medical droid moves with the unhurried efficiency of a machine that has attended 412 births and found each one equally requiring of its full attention. Padmé is extraordinary. This is not a surprise to anyone in the room who has met her, but it is still worth saying. She is extraordinary in the way she has always been extraordinary, not despite the circumstances but independent of them, as if the circumstances simply have no jurisdiction over what she decides to do with her body and her mind, and the specific quality of determination that has characterized every significant moment of her adult life. She breathes. She works. She does not perform strength, she simply has it, the way she has always had it. The structural kind that does not require an audience. Anakin does not leave her side. The medical droid makes a sound of gentle professional objection at one point, and he looks at it in a way that causes it to reconsider its objection and return to its work without further comment. Obi-Wan stands at the room's edge, at the distance of someone who is present as a witness, rather than a participant, who understands that his function here is to be the steady point while other people occupy the center of events. He has performed this function across 1,000 battlefields and 1,000 diplomatic chambers, and he performs it here with the same quiet reliability. His hands folded, his breathing even, his eyes making occasional careful circuits of the room with the expression of a man trying to hold himself together by paying attention to the details. The first cry comes 40 minutes after docking. It is the sound of something beginning. Not dramatically, not with fanfare. Simply the sound of a new human being encountering air for the first time and registering an opinion about it. Clear, strong, demanding, outraged at the temperature and the light and the fundamental transition from one state of existence to another. The medical droid transfers the infant with practiced efficiency, and Anakin reaches out his hands and receives his son. He has held Luke Skywalker once before. For 30 seconds, at the end of everything, on the floor of a second Death Star's reactor shaft, in a body encased in black durasteel with a respirator where his lungs used to be, watching his son drag him out of the dark by refusing to give up on a man who had given up on himself a decade before. He held him then and said nothing because there was nothing adequate, and because he was already dying, and because the moment was too large and arrived too late, and he could not, even then, with everything crumbling, find the word that fit. He is holding him now. Same hands, but different. Organic, warm, the hands of a 22-year-old man who has just come back from somewhere very far away. The child in them is hours old and weighs almost nothing, and has his mother's determination already visible in the set of his jaw, and his father's complete inability to be quiet about his feelings, expressed at full lung capacity. Anakin looks at him. For a long moment he simply looks at this small, outraged, extraordinary person, this boy who will grow up with both parents, who will never have to ask about his father and receive incomplete answers, who will learn the Force not from hiding in a swamp, but from the man standing here, holding him, intending with every molecule of his reconstructed self to be worth knowing. "Hey, kid," he says. Nothing else. Just that. The two words that contain 23 years of missing someone and an entire future of choosing differently, delivered in a voice too rough and too wrecked and too completely genuine to be anything except what it is. A father meeting his son for the first time and finding that all the weight he brought with him, the grief and the guilt and the knowledge of who this boy almost had to become, because his father wasn't there, reduces at the sight of this specific face to something very simple. I'm here now. I'm going to stay. The second cry arrives 14 minutes later. She is smaller than her brother and considerably more deliberate about it, arriving not with outrage but with something that reads, even at hours old, as assessment. Her eyes, when the droid clears them, open and look at the room with an expression that will define her entire adult life. Absolute, unflinching, immediate attention to everything in her environment. She is already cataloging. She is already, in whatever way, an infant catalogs, filing information. Anakin holds her and she looks at him. He did not know. In the other life, across 23 years of being Darth Vader, he did not know that the Princess of Alderaan who stood in front of him in a detention cell with her chin up and gave him nothing, not fear, not cooperation, not an inch of the ground she had chosen to occupy, was looking at her father. He put her in a chair. He did not know. He has carried this since the moment his son told him on the forest moon, the moment that explained so much and hurt in a way he wasn't prepared for, even having been hurt by everything else. He knows now. He looks at her and she looks at him, and he makes a sound that isn't a word. Then he very carefully composes himself, because she deserves a father who is functional. and says, "Hello." She continues her assessment of him. She appears, for a being 14 minutes old, remarkably unsatisfied with his emotional management. Padmé, from the bed, holds out her arms. Anakin places both children with her, and she holds them the way she does everything, completely, without reservation, with every part of herself available. The medical droid takes readouts. The room hums. Obi-Wan, at the wall, makes no sound at all, and his eyes are doing something that he would, if asked, describe as reviewing pertinent information. "Luke," Padmé says softly, looking at the boy. Then, looking at the girl, Leia. Anakin hears both names. He has known both names. He has carried both names across 23 years of darkness as the only light in a room that had no other windows. He hears them now, spoken by her voice, attached to these two specific faces that are entirely themselves, and also entirely already known to him, and the layering of it, knowing and yet receiving, remembering and yet experiencing for the first time, is something he has no framework for, and does not need one. He sits on the edge of the bed beside her. She leans, slightly, against his shoulder. In the Force, which is very present in this room, in this moment, in the specific quality of what the four of them are together, even if three of the four are not yet aware they are in it, something settles. Something that has been braced for 23 years finds, finally, that the brace is no longer required. The living Force, in this small, humming, white Polis Massa room is the precise opposite of Mustafar, quiet, warm, and oriented entirely toward what continues. Obi-Wan clears his throat softly. "I'll speak to Senator Organa," he says. His voice is doing everything possible to remain in its normal register and achieving approximately 60% of that goal. He'll need to know what happened. He leaves the room. The door closes behind him. Anakin does not move. Luke has fallen asleep with the complete, irreversible commitment of the newly arrived. Leia is still looking at everything. Padmé's eyes are closed. Her breathing evening out towards something that is not sleep yet, but is moving in that direction, trusting the man beside her to hold the room while she rests. He holds the room. He will hold it for as long as she needs. Outside the viewport, the outer rim goes about its ancient business, vast and indifferent and entirely unaware that the thing it needed most, the thing it has always needed most, the simplest and most stubborn of all possible outcomes, is happening right now in a small white room on an unremarkable asteroid. A family. Staying. The recording runs for 47 minutes. It begins with the sound of a shuttle's boarding ramp descending on black volcanic rock, and it ends with a blue lightsaber going dark in the silence after everything that mattered had already been said. Between those two sounds, it contains the voice of Sheev Palpatine, Supreme Chancellor, self-declared Emperor, Darth Sidious. Speaking without the performance he maintained for 60 years of political life, speaking to what he believed was a broken and dying instrument, speaking as himself. Padmé calibrated the directional array before the shuttle landed. She calibrated it from a medical skiff, weakened and still recovering and working with one hand while the other pressed flat against her own chest. Feeling her heart do the thing hearts do when they have been convinced to keep going against the advice of everything else. She calibrated it with the precision of a woman who has been a senator for over a decade and understands, at a level below politics, that the truth is only as powerful as the form in which it is preserved. The recording is the form. Bail Organa reviews it twice in the Polis Massa communications room, alone, with the door sealed. Then he opens the door, and his face is the face of a man who has just seen the entire last decade of galactic history recontextualized in 47 minutes, and is already, because this is who he is, organizing the implications into order of operational priority. "How many copies?" he says. "Not a question. As many as it takes," Anakin says. The first transmission goes to the Senate Intelligence Committee at 0300 Coruscant Standard Time. The second goes to the HoloNet's 17 primary relay stations simultaneously, routed through a Chandrillon encrypting node that Bail has maintained for 8 years, for purposes he has never needed to explain to anyone. By 0600, the recording has been received on 4,000 inhabited worlds. By 0900, the HoloNet is doing something it has not done in Palpatine's tenure as Chancellor, which is refusing to be managed. The journalists are not editorializing because they do not need to. The 47 minutes speaks with sufficient clarity without assistance. They are simply playing it. On every frequency, in every language, with automatic translation protocols activating across species who have never heard of Darth Sidious and are hearing about him now for the first time in the same moment as everyone else. The Senate emergency session convenes at 1100. Padmé is not present. She is in a medical room on a Polis Massa asteroid with 2 infants and an incomplete recovery. She has sent in her place a prepared statement that takes 11 minutes to read aloud and is, by broad consensus of every political observer who will analyze it across the next decade, the most precisely constructed document in the history of the Galactic Senate. It does not call for vengeance. It does not call for panic. It calls, in the specific language that only someone with her command of institutional process could assemble, for the immediate convening of a transitional council, the suspension of all emergency powers retroactive to their grant, and the formal criminal investigation of every decision made under those powers across the last several years. It is received in a chamber where 2/3 of the senators have already watched 47 minutes of their Supreme Chancellor speaking without his mask. The vote on the Transitional Council passes in 4 hours. Captain Rex receives the communication on the second day. It comes through official Jedi channels, which are, in this specific moment, not official anything. Because the Jedi Order is in the process of discovering that the thing that was going to destroy it did not happen, which is its own kind of disorientation. The communication is from General Skywalker. Rex reads it standing in the barracks of the Coruscant garrison, with 17 other soldiers around him, who are all reading their own copies. And the barracks is very quiet for a place containing 18 men. He finds Anakin in the Polis Massa communications room an hour later, via secured hologram, and for a long moment he says nothing at all. He has been a soldier for his entire existence, which is not as long as it looks because of the accelerated aging, but has been entirely and completely his. He has fought under this general across 3 years of war. He has trusted this man with his life and with his brothers' lives without question, because trust and this general were the same thing. He looks at the hologram of Anakin Skywalker and finds, on his face, the same eyes he has always known, which is itself information he is still processing. The chip, he says finally. His voice does something fractional and controlled on the second word. Commander, General, there was actually a chip? Fives was right all along? Yes. The word lands in the space between them with the specific weight of a thing that has been wrong for a very long time being named correctly at last. Rex is quiet for long enough that the ventilation system in the Polis Massa corridor makes itself audible. How many of us, he says. He stops. He starts again from the place where the question actually lives. How many of us killed without wanting to? Anakin meets his eyes across the hologram link without flinching and without looking away. All of you, he says. None of it was you, Rex. None of it. He waits until he is certain Rex has received the entirety of that sentence before he continues. And now you get to decide what you do next. Rex is quiet for another long moment. Then, with the specific steadiness of a man who has just been handed something enormous and is determining how to carry it without dropping it. What do you need from us, sir? The clone command structure begins fracturing on the third day. Not violently, not chaotically. With the quiet, deliberate precision of men who have just had their programming interrupted and are discovering, one by one, that the opinions underneath it were always there. Commander Cody stands down from the Coruscant Garrison Command and requests medical evaluation. Commander Bly releases his troops from active Imperial duty and contacts the Transitional Council directly. Commander Wolf, who has been staring at a specific set of orders for 72 hours without executing them, simply deletes them. The chip deactivation is not instant. It requires targeted medical intervention, Kaminoan-designed resonance equipment, one trooper at a time. The specific frequency that Anakin described from memory, with the precision of a man who learned it from a future that no longer needs to happen. The process will take months for the full clone complement. But the command structure does not require full deactivation to collapse. It requires enough commanders with enough restored agency to refuse enough orders. and that threshold is crossed on the third day. Mas Amidala recognizes the threshold when it crosses. He is many things: complicit, calculating, decades deep in the architecture of a man whose crimes are now 47 minutes of public record, but he is not, in the final accounting, willing to go down with a ship whose captain is dead. He contacts the Transitional Council through intermediaries and proposes negotiation. The negotiation is not gentle, and it is not quick, and it results in a document that no one involved considers adequate, and everyone involved considers preferable to the alternative. He will testify. He will provide financial records. He will identify the network. In exchange, he will not be executed. The Transitional Council considers this for 11 minutes and accepts. Obi-Wan sends the messages on the fourth day. He sits alone in the Polis Massa communications room with a list of names and coordinates that should not exist in a single document, that would have been, in any version of events without this specific week, the most dangerous document in the galaxy. Because it is a list of every Jedi who survived Order 66 and where they went. He has this list because Anakin gave it to him from memory, naming each one, naming the planet, naming the specific region, naming in some cases the specific cave or settlement or ship, with the quiet specificity of a man who spent years hunting them. He transmits to each location separately. He does not send the full list to any single recipient. He encrypts everything through the same Chandrilan node. The message is the same in each case, adapted only in the specific details required to be received by the specific person it is reaching. To Yoda, on Dagobah, a swamp planet, damp and force-rich, and entirely unlike anywhere a 900-year-old Jedi Master would choose, unless choosing were no longer available, he sends 3 sentences. To Ahsoka Tano, whose location Anakin named with an expression that was complicated in ways Obi-Wan chose not to immediately examine, he sends 5. To Caleb Doom, who will later call himself something else, and who is currently 14 years old and hiding in a way that suggests he is very good at it, he sends 2. The core of every message is the same. Come in. It's safe. Not because nothing went wrong. Because we fixed it. He finds Anakin in the corridor outside the medical room at the end of the 4th day. The corridor is narrow and lit in the dim functional way of a facility designed for work rather than comfort. And Anakin is sitting on the floor against the wall, with his knees up and his head back against the pale rock. The posture of someone who is stopped in the middle of a transit from one place to another, because the transit required more than he currently has. He looks up when Obi-Wan arrives and does not perform alertness, which is its own kind of progress. Obi-Wan sits beside him on the corridor floor. There is a silence between them that is different from the silences of the last 4 days, which have been operational, full of coordination and transmission, and the necessary business of a galaxy restructuring itself. This silence is personal. It is the silence of 2 people who have nothing left to do in this moment, and have therefore arrived at the things that were waiting underneath the doing. I keep thinking about the people who died in the purge, Anakin says. His voice is quiet, and without self-pity, which is the only register in which this particular thing can be said honestly. Who died in my name? The Jedi, the clones, the rebels who hadn't been born yet, but would have given everything. He is looking at the wall opposite, rather than at Obi-Wan, which is how a person looks at something they have been looking at on the inside for several days. I can't undo what I would have done. I can only not do it. A pause that occupies the length of a full breath. I don't know if that's enough. Obi-Wan is quiet for a moment, not because he doesn't know what to say, because what he is about to say is true, and he wants it to land as true rather than as comfort, which is a different thing, and which Anakin at this point in his life deserves the distinction between. It never will be, he says, and it's more than enough. He lets that sit for precisely the beat it requires. Both things are true. Anakin turns his head and looks at him. Obi-Wan meets the look without elaborating, because the elaboration is not available and would not improve on the statement if it were. Some things are not paradoxes that resolve. They are simply the shape of what it means to have done something irreversible, or to have almost done it, which turns out to feel, from the inside, almost identical. The weight is not arithmetic. It does not sum to a verdict. It simply exists, alongside the actions taken to prevent the worst of it, and both things are permanently simultaneously true. Anakin nods. It is not agreement exactly. It is the nod of a man who has been told something he already suspected and needed to hear confirmed by someone else before he could begin carrying it correctly. On Coruscant, the Senate chamber fills. The vote is procedural, a confirmation of what has already, in practical terms, occurred, the emergency powers that were granted to Sheev Palpatine by a Senate in crisis, that transformed the Republic's executive function into something without institutional check, that provided the legal architecture for everything that followed. The vote is to dissolve them. Retroactively, to restore the constitutional structure that was suspended, incrementally, over the course of a decade of manufactured emergency. The chime, when the tally is confirmed, is a simple sound. A single tone, the standard register of Senate procedure, designed for the announcement of routine legislative outcomes. It was not designed for this moment. It does not know it is the sound of a republic deciding to still exist. It does not know it is the specific acoustic note of a galaxy choosing, by institutional process and by a margin of 412 votes, not to become what it almost became. It rings once. Then, quiet. In a narrow corridor on a Polis Massa asteroid, two men sit against a pale rock wall and say nothing for a while, which is sometimes the correct response to the sound of something being, against considerable odds, preserved. The garden wakes in stages. First, birdsong, from somewhere in the tree line beyond the eastern hedge, a species that does not know what Mustafar is, and would not care if it did. Then, wind through deciduous branches, the specific sound of leaves that are simply leaves, green and unremarkable and alive. Distant water, the fountain in the lower garden, which has been running since before any of the current occupants of this house were born and will continue after. The hum of insects in the warming morning air, the smell of soil and something flowering that has no military significance and no force resonance and no meaning beyond the fact of its blooming. This is the sound of a world that did not burn. It is, if you have spent enough time on worlds that did, almost unbearably beautiful in its ordinariness. Luke Skywalker is 10 years old and already moving wrong. His footwork is good, better than good, instinctive in the way that force sensitivity makes footwork instinctive, his body receiving information about the remote's trajectory a half-second before his eyes do, and adjusting without consultation. The deflection when he manages it is clean. The problem is the anticipation. He is reading the remote correctly and acting on the reading too early, which means he is in the right place at the wrong time, and the remote is not, as a consequence, particularly impressed. It fires. He moves. The bolt clips his shoulder and he makes the specific sound of a 10-year-old who considers this a personal insult. 6 feet away, Leia watches this with the expression she wears when she has already identified the solution to a problem and is waiting, with diminishing patience, for the problem to identify it for itself. Her force sense operates differently from her brother's, less spatial, more relational, attuned to the emotional texture of living things rather than their physical trajectories. She cannot read the remote the way Luke does. What she can do is feel the remote's firing pattern in the way you feel a conversation's rhythm, the pauses, the emphases, the point at which a thing is about to say what it has been building toward saying. She reaches out, not with her hands, and the remote hesitates. Luke stares at it. "How are you doing that?" "I'm not doing anything," she says, with the specific quality of someone who is in fact doing something. On the stone bench at the garden's edge, Anakin Skywalker is 32 years old. He looks it. Mostly, the body has had a decade to settle into itself, to find the arrangement of muscle and expression that belongs to a man in his early 30s who works in the garden when he is not training his children, and reads in the evening, and has, with considerable effort, and the assistance of a very patient wife, and a former Jedi Master who shows up regularly with tea, learned how to sleep. He looks 32 years old in every detail except the eyes, and even there only sometimes, only in the moments when he watches his children and knows, with the specific knowledge of someone who has seen what they almost became, what they will not become instead. He watches Luke argue with the remote. He watches Leia win an argument she isn't officially having. He says, "You're anticipating it too early." Luke turns. He has his mother's attention and his father's stubbornness, which is a combination that will serve him extremely well in every context except the one where he needs to listen. "I know. I'm trying to." "Wait until the moment just before you think you need to move," Anakin says. "That's when you move." Luke considers this with the seriousness of someone who suspects he is being given advice and resents needing it. That doesn't make any sense. No, Anakin's mouth does the thing it does now. Not the controlled expression of a man managing his affect, but the actual smile of someone who finds something genuinely worth smiling at. It won't until it does. That's the only way I know how to say it. He leans forward slightly on the bench. "Trust me. Ask Uncle Obi-Wan if you don't believe me. I spent 6 years learning to stop thinking." Leia, without looking up from her ongoing non-argument with the remote, 6 years seems like a long time to learn something that sounds like nothing. That, Anakin says, is an extremely fair point. Obi-Wan arrives with 2 cups. Tea, presumably, because in 10 years of approximately weekly visits he has never arrived without it, and Anakin has learned that inquiring about the specific variety is both possible and pointless, since the answer is always specific, and always different, and always, somehow, correct for the morning in question. He hands 1 cup to Anakin without ceremony and sits on the bench beside him, and for a moment they simply watch the children together, which is what they do now, which is something they could not have predicted from the lava bank, and which is, Anakin thinks, the most ordinary miracle he has ever been given. "Leia's going to be stronger than him," Obi-Wan says. He says it the way he says things he considers self-evident, with the mild patience of someone who is noting a fact rather than advancing an argument. "Already stronger," Anakin says. "She just hasn't figured out she's doing it yet. She'll be frightening when she does." Anakin looks at his daughter, 10 years old, sitting cross-legged in the grass. Managing a training remote with the calm efficiency of someone who has determined that efficiency is more interesting than effort. He looks at her with the eyes of the man he is now and the knowledge of the man he was, and the 2 perspectives do not contradict each other. They layer. They produce something that is simply pride. Of a totality he had no framework for before these specific 10 years. "She'll be magnificent," he says. A beat, brief and complete. They both will. Obi-Wan sips his tea and says nothing, which is the correct response. After a moment, the Reformation Council met again yesterday. Plun's proposal on attachment cleared committee. Good, they'll want your testimony eventually. On the code. "They don't need me in the room telling them what I did wrong," Anakin says. He is not defensive about it. It is simply a position he has held for 10 years and refined to its clearest form. They need to figure out what they did wrong. I'll be here when they need a reminder. He pauses, which I expect will be soon. Obi-Wan nods once, with the expression of a man who was going to say that, but has been beaten to it. Padmé appears at the garden door at mid-morning. She is dressed simply. Linen. Practical. The clothes of someone whose day will involve transmissions and not ceremonial chambers, though the distinction has become increasingly academic as her final Senate term approaches its conclusion. She has, in 10 years, remade herself with the same precision she applies to everything. Not the senator of a corrupt republic, and not the survivor of a nearly destroyed one, but the architect of what comes next, which is a different job, and one she is building from the ground up, with characteristic impatience for the pace at which institutions change when you are trying to improve them from the inside. She crosses the garden to the bench, kisses Anakin's cheek, watches the children for a moment with an expression that requires no interpretation because it is completely itself, uncomplicated love, the kind that has survived the things that would have ended it in a lesser version of this life, and emerged on the other side, not diminished, but clarified, distilled to its essential form. Then she goes back inside. She has transmissions to take. The galaxy does not rebuild itself. The ease of the exchange says everything the exchange does not say. The forgiveness happened. The reckoning happened. The marriage survived both. The family is real. In the late afternoon, while the children rest and Obi-Wan reads in the garden's shade with the focused serenity of a man who has earned every quiet hour, Anakin sits alone on the stone bench, He closes his eyes. He reaches into the Force not for anything, not in any direction, not toward any goal or person or threat, just to exist in it, just to be the chosen one without the choosing, without the consequence, in the simple state of connection that was always there underneath everything else, and that he spent 22 years approaching, and 23 years running from, and 10 years learning to simply inhabit. The Force, here, is the opposite of Mustafar. Warm, patient, layered with the presence of the living things in this garden and the city beyond it, and the planet beneath it. All of it connected, all of it continuous, the web of the living Force that has never required anything from him, except his willingness to be part of it. And in it, very faint and very far away, he feels something, the echo of the galaxy that didn't happen. Not a vision, not a nightmare. Something quieter, the specific resonance of suffering that was prevented, of 23 years of darkness that were never lit. He cannot see it clearly. He does not want to see it clearly. But he can feel its outline the way you feel the shape of a room you once lived in while standing in a different one. The proportions of it, the specific weight of the air that would have been in it, the names that would have been spoken inside it. He does not know if the Force can hold the memory of a life unlived. He allows himself to believe that it can, that somewhere in the vast and patient network of the living Force, the people who did not die are at peace. That the Jedi who would have fallen are resting in the light they would have been denied. That the clones who would have killed without wanting to are free. In some way that the Force understands even if he does not. He allows himself this belief not because he can verify it, but because it is the only gift available to him from the life he chose not to live. And it costs him nothing to offer it to the dark, and the dark takes it without comment, as the dark takes everything, and transforms nothing. And what remains is the garden and the bird song, and the sound of his children somewhere beyond the hedge. He does not say the following to anyone. He has said it only to himself, in the specific interior register that the years have given him, the voice of a man who has stopped needing to perform his own thoughts before he thinks them. I used to think the dark side was a fall, a descent, something that happened to you. Now I understand it was a choice, 1,000 small choices that I made because I was afraid. Afraid of losing, afraid of being insufficient, afraid of a love too large to protect. The light side isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act from love instead of fear, even when fear is louder. I chose fear. Once, the cost was almost everything. I won't tell you I'm fixed. I won't tell you the darkness is gone. It's there, the way a scar is there, present, integrated, mine, but I am not the scar. I am the man who came back. I am the man who stayed. I am the chosen one, not because I destroyed anything, but because I chose. One more time. In the right direction. Anakin Skywalker chose. And the stars held. The afternoon light moves across the garden the way afternoon light has moved across gardens since there were gardens to move across. Slowly, without agenda. Following the geometry of the planets turning with the patience of something that has never once been in a hurry. Somewhere beyond the eastern hedgerow, 2 children are awake from their rest. He can hear them, the specific acoustic texture of children who are doing something they have not told anyone they are doing, which on this particular pair usually means something involving the Force that they have decided to experiment with independently before reporting results. This is a policy Anakin has been aware of for approximately 2 years, and has not formally addressed because he recognizes it, with a recognition that is partly exasperated, and partly the most specific pride he has ever felt, as entirely his. The birdsong continues. The fountain runs. Somewhere in the tree line, the wind finds the upper branches and moves through them with the unhurried sound of a world simply being itself, alive, continuous, ordinary, entirely unaware of how extraordinary ordinary is when you have seen the alternative. A voice comes over the hedge, clear and bright and 10 years old and completely certain that whatever he has found is the most important thing that has happened in this garden today, possibly this season, possibly ever. Dad. Come see this. Dad. Anakin Skywalker opens his eyes. He stands, and the sound of his footsteps crossing the garden toward the sound of his son is the last sound of this story. Unhurried, deliberate, the sound of a man who knows exactly where he is going and is not running. Because running is for emergencies, and this is not an emergency. This is just a father. Going to see. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.